Hello and welcome to episode 23 of my series as I'm building my way through the battle games in Middle-earth magazines. This month is a simple month with a theme of roads, which is cool because roads are something you see in a lot of different terrain and obviously not just in the SPG, so this is going to be very useful for all sorts of different gaming systems and also for model railways. So hopefully you'll find this quite a useful video. I will be introducing some special builds. I haven't done one for a couple of months, mainly because of not having time, but also not being inspired, which is how it is. But this month I do have an idea of something I want to try and do. So what we'll do is, as per usual, we'll put the camera down at the bench and have a look at what the magazine says, and then we'll get started on the build. Right then, pathways and roads. In this modelling workshop we look at techniques that will enable you to make your own roads and pathways, perfect for this pack's ambush battle game. That sounds fun. Roads can add a scenic focus to the flat areas of the battlefield and are often strategic importance as you play. So yes, you can have like capture the crossroads and things like that, can't you? So there's two sections to this build. The first one is pathways, which I will not be doing. You'll see why in a second. Not because I don't want to, but because, well, it's just pointless. And the second one is roads, and that is what I'm going to be making. So for the roads, you will need to have some sort of basing material, hardboard, foam card, thick mounting board, or thick packing card. The sharp modelling knife, as always, PVA glue and plaster filler, a pencil or a cocktail stick, brush bristles and small stones, flock and coarse turf, polystyrene, a hot wire cutter, modelling sand, black spray paint, and a bunch of acrylic paints. So let's look at pathways first, and then we'll move on to actually what we're going to do mainly for the whole of this video. Pathways are perfect for linking together other pieces of terrain on the gaming area. So what they suggest basically is that you use sand. Literally get your hand or get a spoon and sprinkle sand, and then at the end of the game brush it up again. Now that's a really nice idea and it will work very well, but there's no point in me demonstrating it because all it will be is me pouring sand on the table and then brushing it up again. The benefit of doing this is it's very flexible. As it says, it would take a long time to build specifically modelled terrain pieces to achieve this, and that would also not be very flexible because you would only ever be able to have the path going from, in the specific direction and location that you model it. Whereas this, you're going to be able to place that path exactly where you want over the top of any other terrain pieces you've got, and it'll just be exactly where you want it. The downside being the mess. Anyway, there's one idea. So let's move on and turn the page. This is the last magazine in this folder. Hey, I'm getting on to folder 3. This is going really well. Anyway, roads. Right, this is where we're going to actually do some making. While pathways represent wilderness roads and hidden trails, large and well-defined roads are found linking towns and villages through Middle-earth. Makes a bit more sense to make these more modular and a little bit more set and direct, because, well, roads are. The Romans built them in straight lines because it made it more efficient to march, and so roads don't generally follow the path or follow existing terrain. They go through them and modify them. So this is why it makes sense to actually make these into in a slightly more solid way. So what it says is to plan the road sections. As with the river from pack 14, it's a good idea to plan your sections before you begin to make your road. Roads are usually straight. Yeah, see what I'm just saying, and don't meander like rivers unless there is something in their path, and even then they go through it. This model road is made in sections. So what we're going to do is I'm going to plan out my road sections, and I'm also going to plan out my slightly more advanced build, because what they talk about here, they're pretty cool. They do some really nice stuff. So you've got the straight roads, you've got maybe some a fork in the road or crossroads and curves. My advanced build is going to be a bridge over a ravine. Now, they have covered bridges before, but I think it'd be quite nice to have something like that, or maybe a bridge over a river. It'll just be a bridge, and I think it'd be quite nice to have that in this build. So I'm going to gather together some materials, going to do some planning, and then I'll bring you along. I hope that you enjoy this video. I hope that you do build along. Let me know in the comments below if you do. And yeah, let's build some roads. Okay, so we have a sheet here of the very thin 3mm XPS, which I'm going to use, and what I'm going to use for the banks, which is the next thing to do, is the same stuff. So let me just describe. So what you're going to do is you're going to make these sections 30 centimeters long by 11 centimeters wide. Now the really good thing is that this is a 30 centimeter board, so I have the perfect width, which does mean that some of this roughness is going to be visible, but it's okay. It's not going to be the end of the world, that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come along with my ruler. I'm going to mark across a line, and this will have only straight sections on it. I have other planks which I will make use of to do the different ones, but I'm just going to make several straight sections and do a few different ideas on this. I'm not going to make the same mistake as I did last month, where I just went a little bit crazy. That was not very sensible. So what we're going to do is we're going to come along and line down here and then mark roughly, it says 11.5, 4.5 inches wide. So we will draw a line down here, so that will be where the edge of the road is, with a little bit of waste there just for where I've clamped it to prevent the warping. We are just using a dead pen here, and then I will mark along 11.5 centimeters from there, which is there, and then I'll leave a little bit of a gap so that there's some overhang for me to get my finger in or what have you to hold it down. But it doesn't need to be that wide, because this is not a not a very tall building like the other ones that I've done like this. So what we'll do is we'll do a little gap, just maybe 1.5 centimeters, so to 130, and then it's going to be 11.5, so that's going to be 24.5 roughly, and then we'll leave another gap of 1.5 centimeters to 260. And then 11.5 from that is going to be 37.5. Nice, easy, simple maths that even I can do. And then that's going to be 50.5. So that does leave a little bit of extra waste on that side, but that's fine. So what I'll do is I will grab my rectangle, I will draw these lines up, and then we will start to cut out the banks. Now the banks are going to be done through the same material, so I will be using this, which is an offcut that I've got, and it says to about 2 centimeters wide, so we're going to need to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lengths that are 30 centimeters long and 2 centimeters wide. So what I will do is I will get these drawn, I will get those cut, and I'll bring you back when I'm about to do the gluing. So I've used the Proxon. Sometimes it's so wonderful having one of those, to cut out a load of lengths that will be used for the banks. Now, I'm not sure whether, so let me just read this out. I'm currently debating. So what it says is to glue a strip each side of the base, leaving a small gap, roughly 5mm from the edge, to allow you to cut it down. Now, obviously, I'm currently going to be working on this and trying to prevent the warp by having it all clamped down. And that means that maybe what I should do is actually put these edges right up against my line, and then when I cut them, do a slice right down the middle of each one, and then do the camber there. The issue is then that I would then need to then apply more of my texture to those banks. So I'm not sure. I think what I'm going to do is glue them along the line. Now there is another thing to point out. These strips are just slightly too long. So I think I'm going to glue them down and clamp them, and then I'm going to come back once they're dry and trim them down with a very sharp knife. So the way I'm going to do this is using PVA glue, and I won't film the whole thing because it'll be very, very boring. Now, I have had an issue with these strips, I've said this before, being just too shiny. They're a very shiny material, and sometimes what I'll do is I will actually come along with a wire brush and score up and rough up the surface so there's a little bit more teeth to it. But as an experiment, I'm not going to do that now, or maybe I'll do it on half and half. I'm not going to do it on this one anyway, because what I'm going to do is put it in place, and then use my clamps to clamp it down. You can never have too many clamps. I often use up every clamp I own. If you don't have clamps, then you can glue all these down and then weight them, and that will work just as well. And then when that's dry, we'll see whether that peels off or not. To show you how you go about using a wire brush, let's just grab one. Here we are, here's a big wire brush. What you would do, this doesn't sound very nice, so I will probably mute it, but you basically just use the wire brush and draw it along the line where you want it to go. There we are, it's very quick, and that has given it a little bit of tooth, so there's something for it to stick to. So I'll probably leave this one without, and I might actually do the whole rest of it with a wire brush, and including that I'll wire brush the bottom of these where I'm going to glue, and then I'll glue and clamp. So I'll get that done, and when that's dry we'll find out how well that adheres compared to the dry wire brush ones, and then we'll do the next step. So yeah, I'll turn the camera off now and carry on with this. There we are, so these are dry, and the ones where I did the scraping of glued right, and you can see, there we are, that's the one that I didn't do the wire brush, and it's peeled straight off. So that's what I was saying. So what I'm going to do now is going to put me back a bit, because I was just about to do the next step, but never mind. What I'm going to do now is score up both sides of this, put some more glue on it, and then leave it to dry, and I'll just weight it down. The clamps work very well, but this one I'll just put some weights across it, and it'll be dry by tomorrow, and I'll better pick this up. So yeah, there we are. If you're using shiny material and you're not using special glue, I know that Gator glue would have glued that fine, but yeah, PVA is not going to. So use your wire brush, get it all nice and smarked up so that there's actually some teeth, and then it will stick fine. We're making a few more of these. I've done a fork in the road, which is one of the alternative approaches, which I'll show you in a bit. But what I'm now going to do is look at the road features and the rocky embankment idea. So roads often snake around terrain such as hills, rocks or embankments, and you can combine these elements in a single model. Making a fork in the road will also add variety, as it says. So I've done the fork in the road, but I'm going to do another one. So we'll do those together on this base, and maybe we'll manage to fit another straight in as well, which will be quite nice. So to really make your road come to life, you can create a more impressive road feature. Here we show you how to make a rocky embankment, perfect for providing extra cover on your road. This section should be 30 centimeters long, same, so that it fits with the others you have made. Using a hot wire cutter or saw, cut a bow-shaped piece of 2 centimeter thick polystyrene to be your embankment, which is about 25 centimeters long by 9 centimeters wide. Shave the edges of this block with a modelling knife to create an angular worn effect. Now take your rocky embankment and use it as a template to draw around, allowing you to plan the shape of your road section. So basically what it's saying is make yourself a bit of a rocky embankment, stick it on and draw around it, making sure that the road stays roughly the same width, the correct width. So I have some offcuts over here of blue foam from previous projects. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to sandwich them together. So I'm going to make a bit of a layered approach, and then I will cover over that with my filler and make sure that it actually doesn't have the lines. So it says about 25 centimeters long. That's probably a little bit short for this. So let me see what else I've got. Just have all this offcuts lying around. There we are. I should be able to get a 25 centimeter long section out of that. Yeah, so what I'm going to do is get my pencil and mark that out and then cut it out, and then I will do another couple of layers, glue them all together, and then stick them down to this base. So this isn't probably the best ruler to use because it's not 25 centimeters long, however it's fine. So we'll just do this, and then I'll take it over to the Proxon in a minute and cut it out. That's a good rough shape, like that. And that will fit quite nicely, as you can see on the length. This is 30 centimeters and it will look fine. So what I'll do now is I'm going to build that layer up to maybe one or two more high, and then I might end up using modelling compound to to actually do the rocks, but I'm not sure. I'll bring you along when I decide that. So I'll probably cut out at least one more layer and then maybe have another one on top so it's nice and got a nice bit of bulk to it, and then I'll glue that together with PVA, and I'll bring you back when I come to the next step, and we'll do the fork in the road at that point as well. Let's have a look at this fork in the road. So the way that I've been doing this is I've done one fork that's a left fork already, just as a bit of a test. So what I've done is the width at each end of the road needs to be the same. So we will mark at 11.5 centimetres, which is the width. And then if this is going to be a right fork, what we'll end up doing is having over here another 11.5 centimetre wide, and I will put it up to the edge of the sheet, so I mark 11.5 centimetres there and a straight line across there. Okay, so that shows us that the fork is going to come along at 90 degrees and intersect with the line there roughly, and I'll go and get my 90 degree, actually I've got one here so I can do that now. I have multiple different options for this, so we can draw a line up there, and that is where the fork is going to start. And what we can also do is draw the rest of this side of the road, of the path, can go there. So once you've got that worked out, let's continue that 90 degrees up there so we know where that 11.5 centimetres is going to be. What we do then is you can see just how much of a return we're going to have here. That should be 11.5 still. It is perfect. So what we then do is we then draw at 90 degrees back there. So this is where our path is going to go off, our road is going to go off. And the road is going to do this and it's going to do that. So what we then want to do is get ourselves our our lengths of 2 centimetre, which I cut earlier using the Proxon, and we're going to start to measure and mark up exactly how where these edges of the road are going to be, and these are offcuts from the one I did earlier, so you can see I've got basically the same angle, so I'm going to be able to cut that there, and that, excuse me for my hands, I love this stuff, you just break it like that. That is going to be the return, that's going to be the path going off over that direction, which then means that what we can do is here we can kind of draw a line, and that is where this embankment is going to finish to allow the corner to turn. So I'm going to continue doing these sorts of cuts. I will now actually cut this. I'll actually cut this out. And the other thing to bear in mind is that I am going to use my I'm going to scrape this so that I don't have, so it glues, so I'm going to use my wire brush, so don't forget to do that. So what we'll do is we'll mark that down, that's where that's going to be, and finally we can cut here, and that's that end of that bank. So we have all the embankments we need for the turn off. So now I just need to build the embankment up on this side, glue it all down, weight it down, and then that will be treated exactly the same way as all the other roads. So when we come to cut it out from the board, we'll cut across here, and that will then allow a straight section to go off in that direction, and it will work really, really nicely. So that's how I've done that. It's very simple, as you can see, didn't take very long at all. Just needs a little bit of planning, a little bit of thought, and now I'm going to get the wire brush, scrape that down, glue it all down, and when the bank on the other side, the rocky embankment, which you can see here is drying, when that's dried, we'll glue that down and we'll work on the embankment, and I am hopeful I can get another straight section out of this, but I might not be able to. We'll see whether we can fit one in or not. But yeah, good progress there. So I've changed my mind. This did glue up fine, but when I looked at it, it's just too short, and it's not going to give the impression that it's talking about in the magazine and that I want. It was a bit of a shortcut. rather than throw away the footage, I'll show you the mistake and show you what I'm going to do to fix it. So what I'm going to do is, I have this large block here which is actually spare, and I'm going to mark roughly the shape of that I want to cut out from this, which is basically going to be the whole length and like that, curving round all the way to the other end. I'll put that through my Proxon and cut that curve out, and then I'll come along and with another hot wire cutter I will carve it down to be the kind of like more organic shape. That was just a bit too kind of like specific, that a bit too regimented. I think I'll get a better result with this, and also it will mean that the whole of the whole of the length is taken up with this rocky outcropping. So I'm going to get that over to the Proxon, and then I'll get my hot wire cutter and I'll trim it down, and then I'll show you what it looks like. There, well, that's a lot better. Just a very quick bit of hot wire cutter work. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this to another rough cut of the black foam which I use, and I'm going to trace around the edge, because if you think about it, that's going to sit here, and the kind of like the standard 2 centimetre wide bank, which, so you couldn't see that, the standard 2 centimetre wider bank which will go from here needs to be respected on this side. So what I'll do is I'll trace around this and then do a 2 centimetre wide bank curve, following the curve, and then stick both of those down after having run my scraper over it, or my wire brush over it, and then I'll glue that down, clamp it all in place, and then tomorrow finally we'll be ready to do the next step. Now, looking at this, there is just going to be enough space for another straight to go in, as you can just see there. This is going to just about have enough for 11.5 centimetres, which is that. So I'll probably also do a quick other straight down the centre of this section, so I don't waste any of this material. So I'm going to get that done. I'll have it glued in place. I'll do all of that, and I'll bring you along when I've got something new to show you. Now I have quite a few sections. I've got, what, 6 straights, 2 turns and a banked section as well, and so that's good enough. It's more than I was expecting to make, more than I was planning on making. So what we're going to do now is we're going to move on to texturing the road. Cover the road quite thickly in plaster filler, using the edge of a card strip and leaving a fairly rough finish. This will help give the impression of a well-used, muddy road. Simply take a pencil or cocktail stick and score the still wet plaster filler a few times along each section. Apply a thinner coat to the banks to add texture, and also to cover any gaps or rough edges. If you want a coarser texture, sprinkle some sand over the still wet plaster filler. That's really, really good advice, and I'm going to do that. So what I'm going to be using is this, which is powder, and let me just move the camera a bit so you can see that a bit better. So I'm going to be using this polycell polyfiller, which is basically a powder which I can mix up to any consistency. I will be mixing in at the same time some dark brown house paint that you can see here, and I may also mix in a little bit of grit, but I'm not sure. But the thing that I will not forget to mix in this time is PVA. If you're using this stuff, it's really brittle. It's not designed for moving or flexing. It's designed to fill in gaps, so they're not really, you know, moved very much. So I would always recommend mixing in some PVA, quite a lot of PVA, into the mix, because then when you're moving your terrain and using it, you're not going to have it getting cracked, and it's not going to cause a problem going forwards on that front. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to mix this up in batches, and once I've got a batch mixed, I'll turn the camera back on, and we'll have a look at how we're going to apply it to this section here, and then I'll go and do all the rest of the terrain pieces, get it done, and then we'll move on to the next step. So I'll be back very shortly when I've done a mix and I'm ready to start applying it. Here we have a whole load of tasty looking brown filler. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually make use of my palette knife, which I have, because I've got that anyway, and we're going to come along and I'll do this, like I say, most of this off camera, but we're going to come along and we're just going to draw it into these areas here. And because we're trying to go for like a muddy, rutted track, trying to get it too smooth isn't actually the issue here. Having these draw lines and what have you will do some of the texturing that they say to use a like a coffee, like a stirrer or a toothpick or whatever to cause. So we can actually come along and use the edge of our palette knife and draw it in like that and get the effect that we're looking for, which is pretty cool. So I've mixed up quite a lot. I think this is going to use quite a lot. You can see that there are bits where it's not quite mixed correctly. I can break those up with my palette knife. We can come onto the side a little bit if we want to. We can certainly ramp up the edges. The thing with this is I'm going to be because of using my anti-warping technique, this does mean that I can't do the beveling of the outside edge, so that will have to be done once they're all separated, so I'm going to avoid going too close to the edge. The good thing is once this is on and dried, I can then separate them, because with this filler on, it now won't warp with the small amount of extra material that's going to go on once we've finished this. So I'll be able to separate all these out, get them off the boards, and then go along and do the beveling and probably apply another mix of this once that's done. So yeah, I'm going to do all of these and the other 2 boards that I have. I've got a little bit of time. This doesn't go off all that quick, but I do need to get it done really today. So I'm just going to carry on with this when I can, get as much of this done, and it's going to look very nice as a rutted path, as I say, by drawing my knife down through, I get that effect. Onwards. The tracks, the roads are drying nicely. I've been a couple of days and they've taken ages. Some of them have cracked a bit, but it's fine because I can fill that in. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come along and have a look at this rocky outcrop, and I'm going to use my grout sand PVA mix and just coat it all over with black. This will give it a bit of a solid base, so it should make it a little bit more hard wearing, and it'll also be something which I can dry brush on top of because it does have some texture, yeah, so it's just a good starter for 10 for this bit. So I'll get this done, get this all painted on. I won't bother running the camera for the whole of it, even though it's only going to take a second, as you can see, and I'll bring you back when I come to the next step, which will probably be dry brushing. Well, I might be working on the roads, I'm not sure, but we're nearly done on this build now, which is really cool. I've cut all these out, so what I'm going to do now is come along and bevel the edges. So I'll do that with a sharp knife and just cut at an angle, which isn't very easy while I'm trying to keep in shot. Try and keep your fingers out of the way of the blade, because obviously you don't want to damage it. What you're seeing there with the filler is how I said I added the PVA to try and give it a little bit more give, but obviously it's not perfect. So that's making me think I'm going to do another process which isn't in the magazines, just to make this a little bit more hard wearing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to paint and put sand onto this model. I'm not necessarily going to do it all over the base, but I'm going to paint and sand and put sand covering over the banks, and that will turn into concrete and will be very, very hard wearing, whereas at the moment this, if I continued using the filler, would be a little bit too delicate. The filler's a really good technique, but it is limited. So yes, I'm going to come along, I'll trim all these, as you can see, bevel them down. I'm not worrying about going straight. In fact, a little bit of natural variation is good. And then when I've done all of that, then I'll come back and I'll show you how I'm going to make the rest of it tough. Because yeah, that's just cracking quite a lot, and that's quite annoying. So yeah, and I'm also going to very soon start on the advanced build, which is going to be a little bridge over a creek. So which will be fun. So I'm looking forward to that. So I'll get this done and then come back for the next section when I get to it. They've all been cut out, and what I'm now going to do is try and save this slightly crumbly base material. I'm really pleased with the texture, so I don't want to lose the texture. So what I'm going to be doing is coming along with my terrain paint. There is a link in the bottom of this video and every single video that I do with how to make this stuff. So I'm going to come along, I'm going to paint it on nice and thickly, like so, and then every now and then I will come and I will throw sand on top of it, like so. This dries very, very quickly indeed, and can pretty much immediately be emptied off, like so. And there we are. So I'm going to come along, I'm going to do that on every single section. I'll put some music on now. For myself, I'll stop the camera because it's going to be repetitive. The only thing that I'm not going to paint is going to be over the top of this, which is the rock, which I'll be coming along and dry brushing later. What I might also do, not sure, is do some glue and maybe even take advantage and put some bigger stones along the edges. If I do that, I'll show you how I get to it and work it out. But at the moment, all I want to do really is reinforce these banks, get some texture on them, yeah, just make sure that that crumbliness is going away. So I'll get that done and I'll bring you back for the next step very shortly. Okay, so it's time now to work on the advanced section of this build, which is going to be a bridge over a stream. Now, I have this, which if you are a regular watcher, you might recognise this was the template I made for making my rivers when I did the river section for the Battle Games Middle-earth. And if I can remember, I will attempt to remember to put a link up there to that video if you want to watch it. It's in the same playlist as this one for Battle Games Middle-earth. Anyway, that means that when I use this this bridge section, I will be able to butt one of some of my river sections up to it, and it will work fine. And it's always a good idea to make these templates and keep them so that you can continue this kind of modularity across your builds. So anyway, that's what that is. So what I've got here is another sheet of the same material, and I've clamped it down to a base so that it doesn't warp. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it the same dimensions, so it'll be 11.5 centimetres wide with 2 centimetre strips for the banks. This will be in the centre, so there will be a river coming through the centre, and then the road will rise up very slightly, because that's generally what happens, go across a bridge and then drop down. So I'm going to get that marked out and start to draw that onto this sheet, and then I'll bring you along when I come to start doing the ramp, because I'm not totally sure at the moment whether I'm going to use just modelling compound or whether I might do that with more foam. So I'm just having a bit of a think at the moment, but for the time being I'm just going to come along with my rulers. I'm going to use this edge, actually I'm going to build it at the edge because it's going to be easier, and that is definitely a straight because that's the original cut of this sheet of paper. The foam. So yes, I'm going to go from the edge, so I'm going to mark it out, and then I'll bring you back when I come to do the next actual modelling. This is a rare enough occurrence that it's worthy of recording. I am using the official guide on my Proxon, and the reason that I'm using the official guide on my Proxon is because I want to get an angle which, with the shifting lands kit, which is absolutely superb, it won't work because I can't get the wire to the right angle. It kind of touches at the top. So there we are. Excuse me, a bit of a frog in my throat. So what I'm actually doing is I'm cutting a wedge. So I'm going to be able to push along like this and cut a wedge over like so. It's not ideal because the guide is actually too low, and so when I'm pushing it at the top it's tipping back over, but it does that good enough. These Proxons are brilliant. With these two wedges I now have enough of an elevation to do the river between the banks which is going to be good. And what you can see is I've put that up to the centre of the template, so this is where the river banks will come from my sections. So that's going to look fine. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue these down using PVA again. I've already come along and done my wire brush on that. I haven't yet done the wire brush on the banks, but the banks will come along, and this is flexible enough that I can actually have that, weight it down here and do that as one single continuous piece, which is pretty cool, and I'm quite happy with that. So I'm going to glue that in place, glue this on top, weight it down, and then leave it to dry, and then I'll come along and I will do the rest of the techniques the same as I've done for the other sections. So I'll use the filler with some paint in it and for the track, and do the banks in the same way as I did with the sand and gravel, and I'll do this probably with the toilet paper and varnish technique. So I'll probably come back to this when I'm going to be working on the bridge, which is quite late in the process. So this will now jump to, right, let's get a bridge. So I'm just going to crack on with that, and I'll bring you along for the next step when I get to it. As we approach the end of this build, and we are, I'm nearly done on the basics, and I'm going to start building the bridge in the next couple of days. What I'm going to do, I'm just putting on my yacht varnish on the water to give it a little bit of a shine. And what I'm going to do, I've got two processes that I'm going to do on all of these bases on top of this. The first one is, I have the scenic paint, the brown scenic paint, and I'm going to paint that all over the banks. So that will mean that they will be nice and brown and will not have that dusty grey, dusty colour they have at the moment. The second thing is, in the book it suggests that you use PVA to make puddles. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be using, very sparingly, I don't want it in many places, I'm going to be using the yacht varnish. Like that, just to do a couple of puddles. So I'm going to go across all of the bases, both doing little bits of puddle and taking the paint here, which is my normal scenic paint, and painting it over the top of the sand. And that will both give it the correct colour and also seal it so it doesn't move. So the next step, which is flocking, can be done without having sand moving around all over the place. And you can even, maybe I'll even paint it over the road, but I'm not sure that I will. I quite like the colour of the road. So I'm going to get this done, and I'll bring you back when I get to the next step, which will actually probably be the bridge. So I'm really looking forward to it. I've got some really, really nice ideas for it. So really looking forward to showing you how I'm going to do that and seeing whether my ideas work out or not. It is as much a voyage of discovery for me as it is for you. As I've said, I've got a really cool idea for how I want to do this bridge, and it's a bit of a stretch. It's going to be a really fun build, and that's mainly what's left, because all I have to do after that actually is just do the flocking on the banks, which, as you can see, have dried fine. So the materials are what you see in front of you. You don't have to use exactly the same materials, of course, but I've gone for a couple of different balsa wood dowels and a square balsa wood dowel. I've got some string and some coffee stirrers, and of course I will be using glue and what have you as well. So that's what you'll need to do if you're going to try and build along with this. And the idea is that I'm going to have an upright here, here, here and here, and that's going to be of the thick, and of the thin I'm going to put a little like a peg in here and here and here and here, and then I'm going to have rope coming up round the big upright, along and down, and it's going to be, I might actually end up using smaller scales, I'm not sure, I need to have a play around with it. This might end up being too thick, but it's basically, it's going to be with rope, with string coming down to each of the planks, which is going to be the coffee stirrers, or I might use tongue depressors as I develop it, but that's the idea. So it'll have like a string, kind of like, or not a suspension bridge, but almost a suspension bridge, which is helping keep the planks up. And this will be used to have the coffee stirrers actually stuck across. So what I probably will end up doing is having the coffee stirrers on the underneath. So this will be a little bit kind of like suspended by those ropes. That's the idea. So the ropes will be tied around this, the coffee stirrers will go across, and so it will actually be a little bit more funky than just really simple, which I could do very simple, but it would be boring. It's not what I want to do. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do some measuring, I'm going to do some cutting, and I'm going to work out whether that is the correct dowel for the main upright. It's a very thick piece for 28mm. It certainly isn't a small bit of wood, but I think it might look quite nice, and especially if I do go for the full suspension kind of idea, which is what I think I'm going to do. So I'll bring you along when I've done some measuring or done some cutting, and while you pause after this and go and get together all your materials, and then you can join in and build along. That'd be really cool. So I've done some measuring, and what I've got is I've got the lengthways pieces here. You can see they are 9.5 centimetres each, and I'm going to need to have the coffee stirrers 10 centimetres across to get across to go between those two. So what I'm doing is I'm very carefully using a sharp blade to split these down to size, and that's doing a very nice and easy job with this Stanley knife and my cutting mat, which you can just about still see a gradation on it, and you can see that is a really simple process for me to go through. Take one rounded corner end off, measure it up against the base, and do a little lift motion, and it splits. So I've got a few of these to do. I am going to do this as a relatively ramshackle rickety, so I'm not looking at having a solid floor as such. It's going to have gaps between each of the planks, so I don't know how many exactly I'm going to need, but I'm going to do a few and start making this structure, because once I've made the structure and I've got all of the wood cut to shape and size, then I'm going to stain it and I have to leave it before I glue it together and assemble it. So I'm going to continue with this, just going through a big stack of coffee stirrers that's doing me very, very well actually. Big pack I bought off eBay, and I'll probably do about 15 of these, maybe 10, see if that's enough, and then start gluing it together. And I'll bring you back when I get to the sticking it together stage. Length of coffee stirrer. And what I'm about to do now is start the assembly. I don't often use the Lego I bought for my hobbying, though it can come in very useful, and I think in this case it's going to come in pretty useful itself right now. So I've got a little bit of blue tack on the bottom, and I know that I want this to be 10 centimetres across, as I've said, so I've put that at the 4 centimetre mark, and I'm going to put that corner at the 14 centimetre mark, and that now will mean that I can put down my cross pieces, and I know that they are the correct dimensions apart. And I know that when I start to assemble this, start to put down these on there, that I can generally kind of like hold them across against the Lego, and I'm going to keep a square structure. So that's how I'm going to do this. It's not perfect because it's only just held down with blue tack, and that doesn't hold all that strongly, particularly on such a dirty mat as this, but it certainly is better than nothing, and better than swearing and trying to do it without having something helping you out. So I'm going to use super glue because it's got instant hold, and once I've done the super glue, what I'll then do is probably come along and reinforce it with some PVA or something else. But first of all, what we're going to do is I'm going to put down the first and the last. And you can see why having this framework is such a good idea. It's already moving and being a pain in the backside for me, even with the framework. There we are. Let's get that square, because having it square is the most important thing here. It's rickety, but it's not badly made, it's just old. There we are. Right, so I will let that set. Once that's set, I will come back and I'll put another one across. And then when that's set, it will be a stronger structure, and then I'll be able to come and put the intermediate, the middle bits across, and then we will have ourselves our floor for the bridge. As I've said, this is going to actually be turned upside down, so this is the bottom of the bridge, and the top that you'll see is on the underside. So yeah, this is going to be an interesting little challenge. I'm already excited. I'm already enjoying myself with how different this is. So let that go off, and then I will glue the rest of these beams across. This is now dry, and as you can see, fits really nicely in the gap. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the uprights, and I have decided that this larger plank, or larger log as it would be, is going to be the right size and the right height for me. It's going to look good in proportion. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it to 6 centimetre lengths, and then I'm going to drill out and put a cocktail stick in the bottom of each one, so that then I can do a little hole in the banks here, and I'll be able to pin it in place. So that's how I'm going to secure it. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut very carefully at 6 centimetre lengths, 4 6 centimetre lengths of this. This is what, 1 centimetre dowel, or 12 mil or something like that, 10 or 12 mil dowel, something like that. As always with when you're using balsa wood, just be very, very careful, because it's so soft that if you try and go too fast, you could end up splintering it and destroying it. So just take it really easy, cut it in with a bit of patience, and then you get a nice clean cut. So I'm going to cut 3 more of those out. For the smaller base stub, I'm not entirely sure how long I want it, but I do know that I want it no more than about 12 or 15 mil. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut that out at 20 mil, just so that I've got too much, because I can always come along with this with scissors and cut it down when I've done it, and even though I'll be staining it, it'll just look like fresh core inside, so I won't have to worry about the colour. So again, same as with the thicker one, just be really, really cautious when you're cutting through dowel like this. Don't try and do it all in one go, or you will splinter. There we are. You can see even with that being cautious, I splintered it a bit. So I'm going to do 4 of those at 20mm. So 4 at 60, 4 at 20, and then we'll have a look at staining them, and then it will be a case of assembling. This is going quite nicely at the moment, so I'll bring you along for the next step when I get to it. I'll quickly bring you along for how I'm doing the actual pinning. So I have my bradawl, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start the hole off with the bradawl. Then I've got a toothpick which I can continue, and you can see just how soft the bolster is. You can just use a toothpick once you've got a start to make the hole. And what I then have, and yes, I am this tight, I save offcuts of old toothpicks that I've not needed the pointy end for. But this is why, because now I have them and I don't need to cut up and waste more. So I'll just be shoving a bit of a offcut of a toothpick in, and I'll fill the hole up with super glue, which will keep it strong. And then we'll have a nice pinnable upright. There we are. So that's what I'm going to do for all of these. I'm not going to do it for the smaller ones because there's no need really. I might do that. I might just put a pin right through from the top, but we'll see how that goes. So yeah, there we are. That's how I'm pinning the big beams. Alright, now it's time to do the staining, and I'm going to do my normal, which is wood stain. This is mahogany, so reddish brown, and I'm not sure if it's what I'm going to stick with, but it's what I'm going to start with at least. I may do some other weathering on this, I think, just to make it look a little bit older. So I'll probably come along and dry brush these with the grey paint. But this will both preserve and also give a nice rich underlying colour to the whole thing. So I'm going to come along now just with some old brushes and apply this. It goes off very, very quickly. It's one of the reasons why I like using wood stain, is it does dry very, very, very quickly. So yes, I'll come along and I'll do all of these and I'll do this, and then when it's dried I'll be able to turn it over and do the other side, and I'll bring you along for the next step when I get to it. While the bridge is being made, I have one other thing to do just on this rocky outcropping, and that is to do a dry brush. So I have 2 colours of grey. I've got a dark and a light. So first of all, what I normally do is a relatively heavy overbrush of the darker grey. Now this is separated a bit, so it's going to be a little bit of a pain, but a relatively heavy one, like I say, like that. So it basically turns the rock, or most of it, grey, and leaves some of the deepest recesses only, not with colour. So as the black. So I'll get that done. There we are, simple as that. So I'll let that dry, and then I'll come along with the lighter grey and do an actual real dry brush on it. So that's now dry. So what I'm now going to do is a much more traditional light grey dry brush. So we'll take most of the paint off of the brush, and then just come along and just on the very edges, just to highlight those up, like that. And that will just bring it all together, and it'll give us a good base. So for the little bit of greenery I'm going to add to this, just to add a little bit of interest, it will now have a nice looking rock face. So there we are, that's the rock done. As I thought, that's entirely too new looking and golden. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come along and I'm going to dry brush with a light grey over the top of the wood. And that will really nicely age it down and takes it from being really, really bright to being just a nice kind of aged wood effect. So I'll get that done on all of it, obviously both sides of this as well, and then we're going to start to assemble the actual bridge, which is going to be the fun part. So yeah, we're getting there. I'll get the rest of that done and I'll bring you along for the next step very shortly. The next step on the bridge is going to be to stick these smaller posts in, and then I'm going to start flocking, and I'm going to flock all of the pieces, all of the sections together. And when they're flocked, then I'll come along and I'll do the rest of the bridge, which is a little different order to what I was going to do, but I think that having the flocking down before I have long uprights here will make it a bit easier for me to work with it. So you can see that this is slightly warping, which is a bit frustrating. Obviously, I could solve that with a bit of pressure, or maybe I can put some tape along the bottom. So I'll have a look at that later, and I'll bring you along and tell you how I managed to fix that. That has warped since I've taken it off of its base, and I think it's probably the fact that I took it off the base too soon, before the varnish had fully cured. So that's me being in a bit of a rush, causing a problem. So anyway, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to work out exactly where on this I want to position these shorter uprights, which are going to need to be in line with the bridge, and probably about halfway back or just over. So I think around where I put that one is where they're going to go. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come along with a knife, and I'm going to just basically clean a little bit of an area and then PVA them in place and leave them to dry for a little while before I move on. So that's my plan. So yeah, let me grab a knife and let's get that done on this one, and then I'll do the rest off camera. So I just want to make sure that I've got a nice little flat area for it basically. So I'll just scrape away a bit. There we are, you can see that now stands up on its own without me needing to hold it. So I can put a double super of PVA in that gap and then set that in place. So I'll do that, and then I'll get on to the other three and let them dry, and I'll bring you back when I get to the next step, which will now be flocking, which is going to be finishing off all the other sections and then very close to finishing this one as well. So there we are, there's my first upright in place. And now we come to the great flocking of our time. Here are all the road sections, as you can see, laid out on top of some paper so that the flock doesn't get everywhere and cause all sorts of chaos and mayhem. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make use of my terrain glue. There's a video in the description of this video linking to how I go about making that. And because I'm lazy a little bit, and I'm a bit running out of my dark flock, the homemade dark flock, I really need to make some more, and I will do, and I will video that because I have yet to do a video on that. I'm going to make use of my shop bought flock, which is Musgrun and Lichtgrun, which I bought in Belgium many years ago when I first started on this crazy journey. So yeah, so I'm going to basically flock the banks, and at the same time as that I may put some other details in, I'm not sure. I'm quite happy with how they are. They stack nice and flat. Putting like reeds and what have you on there will make it all quite difficult to store. It's already going to be a bit of a pain because of the bridge. But yeah, so I'm going to get stuck into that, and I will show you what it looks like when it's done. It won't take me very long. Next step is to come back with the same terrain glue and paint over the top of the grass. Now, a lot of people will do this with a spray, but I find that this is very much more secure. It does take a little bit longer. You'd have to be a little bit careful and delicate, especially if your flock isn't quite dry, because it will reactivate a bit. But what this will mean is that your flock is not going to go anywhere. So once you've done this, put it somewhere to dry and leave it for at least 24 hours, if not more, and then this will be like rock solid and it won't go anywhere. So I won't run the time lapse. That was a little bit of an afterthought. I won't run the time lapse on this one. I'll just come along and do these bit by bit. And then yeah, the next step that we'll do on this, because all of the main build is finished, is going to be assembling the bridge, which I am very much looking forward to. but I will leave that until after this process is fully dry. So hopefully these will dry quick, because I've only got a few more days yet until the video needs to go live. So I decided to clamp these down after I put the second sealing PVA across the top of the flock, just because there was a slight bit of risk of warping again with adding that. So hopefully with that has actually prevented warping. So let's just check. Yep, they're looking pretty flat to me. So actually dead flat, that's really good. So yeah, so I'm going to take these off, and that's the basic build done. And then what we're going to do is finish up the bridge, and then this build is complete. So the bridge. So I'm denied about this a little bit. I was thinking about maybe boring a hole through the middle of this upright here and having the rope go up through a hole, along, and then down through another hole, which is quite a nice idea. But what I think I'm going to do is the slightly simpler idea, which is I'm going to bring the rope up, tie it around, and then down. So what I've done is I've got the level of this bridge just sitting on top of these thin slivers of XPS, because the bridge is going to be floating, as you remember. We're going to be putting drops down of rope as well to the bridge, so I need to get it to the right height. So I just did that just to check that's the right height, and it actually is perfect. So the first thing to do now, which I'm going to do first of all here, is I'm going to affix these uprights. So I'll find the location, and then using my bradawl I will push a hole in, and then I will be able to push that in and then glue that in place with a bit of PVA. So I'm going to do that on all of them, let that dry, and then I'll come back and do the work with the rope. Yes, I've changed my mind. I've had a look at it, and I've realised that trying to run the string up over the top and down is not going to be very good. It's not going to be very secure, and having a hole in is going to be a better idea. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark a hole with the bradawl to start it off, and then I've got this cool Tack Life rotary tool, and I will use that to very carefully drill through. So I'll put it onto the middle setting, and then I'll put some music on because it's a bit noisy and it doesn't sound very nice. And there we are. I'll be able to feed the string through that, and that'll be a much better idea. So I'm going to get that done on the other ones, and then I'll glue it back down again because I've pulled them out, so I'm going to have to put some more glue on. And then when that's all set, I'll be able to run the string. Okay, so now we're coming to the end of this build, and I have had a bit of a practice. As you can see, I've cheated, I've done the other side. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the string in place on this side and show you how I've done that. So I've tried to get these holes wide enough. It is a faff to feed this through if they're not. It's a faff to feed them through if they are wide enough, actually. So I might put some music on while I do this. But what you do is you feed the string through. There it is. That's got through okay, but it's untwisted. So you need to keep twisting, and then we'll feed it through this side. So let's just get that done. Ha, there we are, done it. That was a pain in the backside, wasn't it? But anyway, once you've got the first little bit in, it's fine. So with that now done, what I do is I wrap around, and I'm going to do it the opposite of that one, so from the outside, and I wrap around this post, and then get myself one of my clips. As you know, I love my clips, and then clamp that in place, just like that. Okay, so that now is going to be able to be pulled tight. And then I do the same at the other. So we start at the outside, we wrap around, and then we can pull it as tight or whatever, and we clamp it again. So with that clamped in place and positioned correctly, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little bit of PVA, and I'm going to drop a little bit of PVA on this twist,
and another little bit of PVA on this twist. And then finally, just with my finger, though you can use a brush if you want to, just kind of smear it all around where the rope is touching the peg, and then leave it. And that is as simple as that. We have our tension string in place, which will be holding up the bridge. So the next thing to do, which I will do very shortly, is to actually attach the bits of string which are going to support the bridge. So let me just wash my hands and I'll bring you along and show you how to do that. Okay, so how are we going to go about suspending this bridge? Which is a bit crazy, isn't it, actually, to be honest. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to do this in 2 stages. First of all, I'm going to get this length of string, or I'm going to cut several lengths of string that are going to be longer than the distance between where the bridge is and where the top string is. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to very securely glue them at intervals, so probably one by the first one here, probably every other or something like that, I'm not sure. I'll play around with that as I work it, and let that dry completely, and I'll do that using the PVA so that it absolutely dries completely. And once that's done, and I'll bring you back when that's done, then I'll sit the bridge onto these little bits of foam board here, and then I will either tie off or glue to the top. And then I can remove these and it should be suspended. So I'm going to go along now. I'm going to make sure that I cut enough of these lengths of string to do both sides, and I'm going to start to glue them down. So I'll bring you back once I've got them all glued in place so you can see how that looks. So here you are, you can see how I've gone about attaching these strings. They're glued on the edges, not on the top. So when I take these clamps off, they will pull up straight from the edge, which should then put them pretty much in line with the actual with the top rope. So I'm going to let that dry, and then when that's all dry, I'll bring it back and show you how I'm going to attach it, and then we really will be right at the very end of this build. Right then, let's see how well this works. So the first thing we've got to do here is we've got to snip off these extraneous lengths of the rope. So just snip that there, and also just a bit that there. So that's that bit finished. So now you can see we have the 2 ropes going across the top, and here we have the stuck down and looking okay bridge section. So again, I'm making this up as I go along, as I always seem to do, but my thinking is that I'm going to want to either glue it in place, or maybe even I can manage to tie it and glue it, which would obviously be even more cool. So I'm going to have a bit of a fiddle around off camera, because I think I might want to just do one side off camera, get it right, and then show you quickly how to do it. But that's where I'm at. So yeah, I'll be back in a bit. Alright, let's see how well this comes out. So you can see here that I've done one, and I've done the other one end as well, and I am tying them. I think it's actually going to be better than if I tie them and then I also glue them. So first thing to see is I've put a little bit of a weight on. It's just not very heavy weight, but it's just enough to prevent me from accidentally lifting too much when I'm doing this. And then what I'm doing is, with my big clumsy fingers, which makes this quite difficult, is I'm tying the knot. And you can see even with the weight it lifts a little bit, but that's fine. Once it's in place, there we are. So yeah, that filmed okay. So I'm going to do that. I've done 3 of them out of 8, so I'm in nearly halfway. I'll do the rest of those, then glue and cut them off, and then I'll be back to wrap up the build and show you what they all look like when they're put together. And here we are. These are examples of all the sections that I've made. So we have one of the straights here, we have a turn, we have the interesting section that they suggested to do with the kind of rocky outcropping, which looks really good, and then my advanced one, which is the only one that's warped because of the resin in the middle. Well, not the resin, the yacht varnish, which is a shame, but I'll be trying to work out how to solve that, and I'll let you know if I do. I might have to put something on the bottom, so it's a little bit warped. However, the actual structure is great. I'm very, very pleased with it. I'm really pleased with how the bridge looks. Very interesting, a little bit different. Obviously I've done bridges before, but nothing quite like this. So yeah, that's what it looks like. We have a big stack, so I've got a whole other corner piece there, another turn there, and we have this stack
of straights as well, and you can see that nothing has warped apart from that one of the bridge. So there we are. What I'll do now is I will pop some pictures up in detail of each of these items so you can have a look at them, and then I'll be back to wrap the video up and summarise what I've learned. So there you are, that was a fun month again. A basic one. When I first looked at it I thought making roads, that's going to be a bit boring, but I've actually really enjoyed it. I've enjoyed the build for the basic stuff, which is just following the magazines. They come out really nicely. I might do some corners and make a few more lengths as well at some point, but for now I've got enough to do the board that I'm thinking of doing and enough to play games. And with the clamping it really has helped with the warping. I think probably the bridge, that I should have left clamped for longer. I rushed myself a little bit, which is a shame because it is the only one that's actually got even the slightest warp, but it's by no means not usable. It's just a bit annoying that it's a little bit warped, but hey, what can you do? So thanks for watching. Let me know below if you get this far. I really do appreciate it. Pop a comment below and let me know what you think. Let me know if you're going to give this a go, or if you have already, how you found it. And yeah, it'd be great to hear from you. I do love reading all your comments, and I do reply to every single one of them. Don't forget to subscribe as well if you haven't. Tell everyone about this channel if you like it. Let's get those viewer numbers up. I'd appreciate that. I know a few of you are going out there batting for me, and I appreciate that very much as well. So I'll wrap up, as I always do, by saying thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next month for the next Battle Games in Middle Earth magazine build. And please stay healthy, stay safe, and stay well.